record ourselves one day and just do that. Jargon. Weekly jargon. All right. Well, hey, guys, we're live here November 1st. Welcome to the Weekly Jargon. And we got our jar full of questions. But first, how was the candy last night? Halloween.
Popping at our place.
Yeah, popping?
Always, yeah. So.
Are you one of those that stand on the porch like dressed as something
not
and scaring?
that guy,
No,
but our location is definitely a destination spot. So
yeah.
Get a lot of people.
Well, I can't say the same for my spot. I think we're more of the darker areas there where people just want to go down Mainbury, and that's kind of the spot that everyone wants to go out and trick or treat.
When you said we're part of the darker spot, I thought you were going a whole other direction. Just take that type of podcast.
You know, for some reason, people just don't see that area as a very high traffic area. So you'll get one or two people. I mean, I was sitting there next to the door, but I was probably watching more on my Facebook and TikTok, just waiting for them to come through.
You know, Jose, you reap what you sow, and you know all those years passing out hard candies.
That's right.
You know, one apiece to only kids. They stopped showing up.
They do.
Yeah.
They
Brody
do.
has the full candy bars, and that's why they're.
I was promoting apples, and I don't think they like apples. So
yeah, we did some false advertisement. We had our blow-ups out, and the Halloween blow-ups, skeleton and a ghost, and the lights were all on. But then we took off to our friend's house down the street. So I could only imagine how many people were knocking on our door waiting for us to show up. But anyway, so good stuff, good candy, and now here we are, November 1st, and we are talking about student athletes, right, or young athletics.
Yes.
And such a hot topic. I mean, anytime you think of a young athlete, whether you're a parent yourself or you yourself were a student athlete, you can remember the coaches, the practices, all the work that goes into it, and ultimately the ambition to get to that next level, and whether that be winning state or valley or maybe making the pros, but we all know it's pretty difficult to do all those things, right? So we got a bunch of questions that were asked by several community members pertaining to this topic, and so we're going to go to the jar and take a peek at those questions and do our best to answer them. And so we're going to start this off with Mr. Rohi.
Okay. There you go.
All right, you're up first.
Let's see here. Do you get moments of disappointment when watching your youth play? That's a good one. I think, especially in the last couple of years when we've got asked to have security at some of these events, I could say parents are definitely on the receiving side of disappointment sometimes about their expectations of their child. But I think when it starts off like those T-ball games, everybody's just it's funny watching them run around. But as you move up, it's a little more serious. So
I certainly agree. I think it gets cutthroat you be at these soccer games at times, and you have parents that are very, very engaged in the game.
Yeah,
and a lot of times it's hard not to put yourself in their shoes. And I think for me as a parent that has kids that play, sometimes you want them to somehow magically do what you want them to do, right? And it doesn't happen. So therefore, there's moments of disappointment, but I think overall you have to. Does the youth understand that? Because I think sometimes they see it in their face, right? I try to hide as far away as I can because I don't want them to see the emotion. But it's really hard. It's really hard to cover.
Yeah, I've literally been at a golf tournament where Jose's there. Both of our sons are playing, and Jose's like he's in the woods, like just creeping and walking slowly. I have a cart, I'm all driving all close and everything. And Jose has a little bit more experience, especially in that sport with his kid being a little bit older and playing more. And so he knows, it felt like you knew the level of how close you needed to be for your son to perform well, maybe not see you. Or is it more for you?
I think it's because you play, and this is why a lot of good competitive folks don't become great coaches, is because they don't have a lot of the patience that it requires for a young kid or a young adult or even a professional to develop themselves into a really great player, because that competitiveness is in your nature, right? So you have to acknowledge that, first of all, right? And if you do, then there's a lot of pressure going into that kid because he knows that you play also. And if you're playing at a higher level, then that kid's goal at all times is to try to always beat you, right?
Right.
And so I think I give them the space. I don't want to add any added pressure. I think as time goes on, kids are overcome that pressure. But early on, sometimes, and I can speak only for myself when I say this, but certain parents, like myself, we may add that just by being present there, we can add added pressure that's not necessary.
But to revert back to the question, though, have you ever been disappointed?
Oh, yes. I mean, truthfully, I have, because a lot of times I know, like you said, I know that this particular shot requires this much of a swing speed or this much of a take back. And if I see the practice swing that goes really full going, you're only about 30 yards, I go, okay, you're grinding your teeth. Oh,
yeah.
But, that's all you can do is grind your teeth, internalize it. It's not good. Obviously, as a parent, I don't think it's good. But if you're there, I think it's important that you have to allow that youth to kind of grow into that.
Yeah.
And that's my take. I do got to admit that there are times where you are disappointed. Not at your kid. You can't. And if you show that, then I think that's the problem. Man.
Right. So I've been disappointed with my kid, and it was more so. I always tell my son, he plays basketball, and I always tell him, I'm never going to be mad at you for missing a shot, because that would be dumb, right? Pros miss shots. I miss almost every shot I take, right? I would never get mad at you for missing a shot, but I do get mad when the attitude starts coming out. You're hanging your shoulders. You're not hustling back on defense. You're letting your team down, right? And so there have been, after tournament, I think the very first tournament we went to Los Angeles, it's Los Angeles, and so, their perception is that, well, it's not just a perception. There are really quality, teams out there and players, but the intimidation that he allowed to take over him was overwhelming for him. And he just looked like he's never played before, real timid and everything. And for that reason, I was really disappointed. So I think, there are times where you are going to be disappointed, and it's because of those things that you can control. There are players. I have seen parents out at the soccer fields, however, super upset because they're not getting past the defense, they're not scoring goals, and it's just like, you can't coach at the game. You can't teach somebody something at game time. That they're running a defense, they're executing it. There's no, you don't get disappointed at your kid because he can't run past 5 or 6 players. Right? It's just not going to happen at that point. So that's my answer to that question. Yes, I've been disappointed, but it's always in regards to attitude and the level of commitment that I see being put out on whether it be the court or the golf course. So.
And with that, Abel or Rohi, when you say attitude, how is the attitude, and maybe in basketball, but how would you see the attitude in the child, though? Do you think the youth understands that? Do you think what do you think is going through their head, their emotions when, like you said, they're putting their head down? Is it because they feel like they failed at something? Or they're going through a moment of trying to grind through it, right?
Yeah.
And for us, obviously, sitting on the bench and watching them from a different angle, that's what makes it so difficult, right? Is because you want things to happen a certain way that you visualize up here, but at the moment, who knows what that child is going through, right? Or that youth, at least at my perspective.
Yeah, that attitude of being sports are emotional,
Very emotional, yes.
I one time had somebody say, like, man, that kid shouldn't be cussing on the court like that, And I said, well, he fell and slapped his face against the floor, literally. And he said, fuck, and slaps the ground, right? Yeah. He used it properly. I mean, if that happened to any one of us, we would say, fuck, that hurt, right? Yeah. But that's different, obviously. That emotion, that response to something's a lot different than, cussing out the referee because of a bad call or anything like that, right? Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I would say, you do have to manage your own expectations as a parent, as a bystander, as the audience or somebody standing in the stands and supporting, and you support, and you try to coach your own kid about emotions and energy and things like that, but never get mad if they're having a bad day. Sometimes people just have a bad day.
Well, you have kids that are some young. Are they in that stage of getting out in the athletics
A little
world?
bit. I mean, my oldest is he's best at cross country. You know, that's where he can run, so he just likes running.
What age is that?
He's 10.
10? Okay,
So,
cool.
you know, and I think I'd say more disappointment, but just, you know, upset because I know he can do a lot better, but sometimes he doesn't have the drive just yet to
Yeah.
want to win,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah, and that's part of the disappointment. Sometimes we can assume that they don't want it, right? Why don't you want it? Why don't you try? But I always remind myself, hey, there's some times where you don't want to go to work.
Yeah.
There's some times where you go to the golf course instead of going to the office because you just need some time away, right? Or you need to separate yourself a little bit, reset, recalibrate. And then there's times you do show up to work and you suck,
Yeah.
and and you're not very good, you're not very productive, all of those things, and kids can have bad days and do have bad days as well. And so it's like you can't take it out on them for having a bad game. They're going to have hundreds of games, right?
And I think more so is what do you do to try to help them cope with that? Because I think as parents, I mean, and this goes back. I mean, I think with parents, they try to teach us or rear us a certain way. I know that me growing up, not so much in athletics, but I know a lot of things that my dad would try to teach me. I guess I wasn't really good at it because he would let me know. And a lot of times, those things they're resentment, right? You hold that. And today with kids, I think, you want to help them. And that's why the attitude has changed in sports is how do you treat a child that probably doesn't have all that talent but wants to get out there and participate. Now there's participation awards, right? You participate. You give them that extra little boost to try to get out there. And you'll have those that, well, maybe that he's just not talented enough to play or physically. Right. But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many athletes really come out of that shell and become very good at what they do. But that question, tough question, and again, I think, to be honest with ourselves, I think I would have to say yes, there's moments of disappointments because many of the times it's an extension of you. Right. And that reflection there, that's you out there, and you don't want to go through that, I wish that was me, right? But
if I had that opportunity, I would be tearing
exactly.
it. And I think golf is easily one of the hardest sports to be a parent and watching your kid because they have these dumb rules that I think is really dumb where you can't say anything to your kid. You can't coach them at all, right? Every other sport, it's like, Johnny, get back on defense, and hey, use your pivot foot, and you can't do that, and you're literally, you have 100 coaches screaming from the sidelines, but those little tips are very useful. And golf is like a game of centimeters, right? And that's a whole other show. But it's a game of just like fractions of an inch.
They call it a game of inches. Yeah.
And so the slightest, misalignment of your stance, to Jose's point, coming back so far, all of that matters, right? And when you have somebody who's 11, 12, 13 years old, they're having to deal with all the other emotions of competing and everything else, and making sure they're locking their cart so it doesn't roll back on them. But then they got to remember all of that stuff too. And I at that same tournament or the last tournament with the middle school, my son was just slicing everything, right? Well, he's driving with the ball on his back foot, and so everything's just being pushed to the right. And it's like it was his first tournament. He has all I know that all these thoughts were going to his head, and he was super calm and relaxed on the range, hitting great shots. I thought, man, he's going to do really well, but I can't tell him scoop the ball up in your stance, and that solves everything. Yeah. And it took him 4 holes to figure it out. By then, his score's already, tanked, and he was able to recover and finish in the middle of the pack. But it was so emotionally draining for him, and that was one of the things where I wasn't disappointed at him. And I'm not going to sit there and say you should know this stuff. I was disappointed at the rules and the organization. Like, how dumb is this? Pros have caddies who are coaching them, and pros have trainers and all this stuff. It's just kind of fun.
I think in that case there, I think they just want to allow the youth to really get to understand how to do it on your own, how to really get yourself into a groove, because a lot of times that is what we see. We have a lot of coaching going on with kids, right? Whether it be a basketball, football games, and like you said, screaming from all over the place.
Right.
Get the ball, right? and I mean, a kid, at that moment, you got to remember it's seconds, it's milliseconds, and the same thing with the golf swing. It's just a 1 or 2 seconds that you have to really make, and you can't have all these thoughts going through your head. You're at the heat of the moment where you're trying to perform.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard not to, but like you said, we've already, I think, beat this question down.
Well, it's a good one.
It's a great one.
I think it's strung some chords here, and so anyway, we're going to go to the next question, and Jose, you're up.
Let's see what we got.
Be careful, don't pick your own. I see you peeking there.
Okay. All right. Is time spent training better spent studying for school? So this is a good question. I see, and I can tell you personally with my kids, is that you want it more. You want to have them shine more in the athletics, that sometimes you put aside academics. And it took me a while to really realize that my kids were really wanting to concentrate on their academics, because they didn't want to fall behind. And both of my kids attend a STEM academy, and it's like it really beefed up the amount of homework that they had to do. And having to see my kids struggle sometimes late at night, and why are you doing your homework this late? Why don't you do it in school? Why don't you do it after school? And having to get on them, it's just a constant struggle, because as a parent, you really want to see them do well in all areas. Mm-hmm. But not all kids learn the same, and they don't learn at the same level. Some spring later, some get it early. And I got to say, for my kids, it was difficult for me, because I was one of those kids. I didn't get a lot of the stuff early on. Yeah. It took me a while, and repetitive. Mm-hmm. So, but I do like the athletics part, because it gives them that extracurricular activity that, let me get out of doing this whole academic stuff and get me somewhere else that distracts me from that. But I think when you have both of these things come together, I think it's a lot of pressure for a lot of kids, because you want them to do good academically, but you also want them to do good in athletics. And there comes a time where something has to sacrifice, right? Because if you're going to put that much training into a child or a youth, especially in any sport, it requires lots of time. And same for academics. I don't know that both can coexist without one not taking a hit. And just from experience, I think I try to listen to my kids for a while, and no, it should be, you need to be practicing this much, right? But after a while, you got to listen, and I think they tell you, shoot, I don't want my kid almost practically crying for trying to go out to practice. Practice is supposed to be something fun.
Yeah.
But if I see a face of like, I don't want to do it no more, then that should tell you in a good sign that, hey, maybe it's time to back off a little bit. And there's some kids that love it. They thrive on it. So this is a good question. I mean, but I do think you have to find balance. You do have to find balance.
Well, I think, I've seen, as a coach myself, I've seen people, introvert kids come, and they can barely pick up their eyes or pick up their chin and talk to somebody, right? And by the end of the season, they're high-fiving and, goofing off, and it really helps them. It helps them, their social skills. It helps them belong to something, be part of something. Because academics, there is no real team of academics, right? Unless I think the robotics program's pretty awesome, because you get that sense where you're learning, and it's a team environment. But most of the time, it's very traditional. You're 8 hours in school, and that could be very, it could be very taxing on an individual or a kid. I think our kids, they have 15 hours a day, right? And 8 of those are spent at school. And, my 7th grader, he has 7 classes. They get 4 minutes in between each class to get to the next one, right? They eliminated their break because they're having too much issues. They're at that age, they're wild, right? Mm-hmm. So you get 4 minutes between each class, and so it's just boom, 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 boom. And you get your lunch, and that's really your break. Your PE is kind of your break. It kind of gives you some time outside. But you go from that structure, 7 different teachers, 7 different expectations, 7 different, assignments being thrown at you, and you're hearing, and it's like new energy every time, right? You're tired. Oh shoot, I got to get to my next class. Then boom, here comes another teacher, with all of their standards and everything. So I do also enjoy getting my kid out of there, taking him out to either the golf course, go shoot some hoops, and just let them just kind of get some physical activity, and I think it's good for them. That sun is really good. So, but I will admit that I have been guilty of calling a personal trainer before I call a tutor. And it's like, oh, I want them to get to the next level here, but then I'm satisfied with them being, and my kids get A's and B's if they're really struggling, but so they've always done really well in school, but to what standard, right? To what standard is that? And if they were just doing really well in a certain sport, I'll drive them to Los Angeles and go find somebody who will beat them up just to teach them, hey, there's people doing it at a higher level. Let's try to elevate that to that level, right? We don't seek that type of challenge in academics. At least I don't. Yeah. And so that's where, as I'm sitting here thinking like, oh shoot, maybe I am guilty of that, right? Maybe there are times or moments where I could put a little bit more emphasis in the academics and go seek those challenges and say, well, great, I'm glad that here in good old Madera you're able to get A's, but can you solve problems better than these kids over here, at this higher level? Can you expand your thought process? So I don't think there's just enough platform for that, though.
I mean, what I've seen and what I usually hear that I don't like to hear a lot of times is a lot of parents pushing kids because they say, well, my kid, he doesn't have the grades. He's not going to really, go anywhere academically. So he has to have sports.
Right.
and I feel like you were saying, maybe if it was something where we were starting, at like elementary or high school, and you kind of had that feeling like, okay, my kid's not going somewhere. But now, like you said, we're starting. They can barely walk, and they have a baseball bat in their hand. Or they got a soccer ball, and you're already giving up on the kid to say, no. All the focus is going to be sports because he's got to be that pro because he's not going to be smart enough to do it academically. And like I said, I mean that's where the studying versus the sports, there has to be a balance. I don't know that it's easy for him because, like you said, Jose, I mean, to sit there and say, okay, 8 hours of school, then homework, then practice, and to rinse and repeat, 5, 6, 7 days a week. I mean, I know as a kid, I like sports. I played all the different sports and had fun in elementary, but I know that transition when it came to high school, it was the question of like, are you going to go try out for a sport in high school? And I looked at it and said, well, okay, they practice this many days a week and this many hours, and and at that point I was really more into academics than sports. And you find that pressure of, well, geez, high school, it's already a job. I'm not even getting paid for it, and it's already a full-time job to be whatever basketball or baseball player or whatever you wanted to do. And I remember the kids, like you said, Abel, like the kids that we would compete against that were really good. You'd find out, well, they're on the travel team and they're playing on the off season and they're doing all these things. And do you want to be that good? I mean, I was happy where I was. But like I said, when I see some of these parents pushing kids along, I just hear too much of that. It's because they don't feel the kid's going to have the academics, and they need that because later on they're going to need like the scholarships and these things, to help them push through to get that degree or whatever they're expecting. So.
Yeah, and what doesn't help with that is our media, right, and we'll call it society, and we celebritize athletes. I mean, those are our celebrities, the pro athletes. They're making millions of dollars and they can do all the fancy stuff, and now kids are seeing that on TikTok and Instagram, and this is what this life gives you, right? And I think as parents we see that too. Oh, I want my kid to have all this. Give him the baseball bat, so he can be the next Bellinger or whoever, whoever you're idolizing. And but yeah, it's those expectations, like my kid could do that too, right? I want him to be that celebrity. They're the ones getting the scholarships. On our local news station, they're celebrating this individual out of Fresno who just made the pros, and and so a lot of cheer, money, fame comes along with the athletics, and you don't hear anything about the athlete. I don't even hear about the spelling bee winners anymore.
Yeah.
Remember that used to be a big
Yeah,
deal? Like, I don't even, and it's kind of like, I don't even know when it is, and that used to be a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything's wrong with that, but you're right. A lot of focus is concentrated on celebritizing, like you said. There is a lot of celebrity athletes out there, and sometimes these can be the role models that kids look up to, right? It's no longer cool to look up to a NASA scientist or some other deal, right? Or maybe an engineer or what have you. But a lot of it comes down to the math, right? I mean, we see these big celebrities, but we don't really see what's behind it. There's millions of kids that play competitive sports, and then that kind of narrows down when you get into college. Now you're talking in the hundreds of thousands. And then you try to get out of college, and now you're down to very few, maybe a couple thousand, maybe a couple hundred, because several of those kids will go into the NBA, several of those kids will go to the MLB, and so forth. Whatever competitive sports out there, it really narrows down. So at the end of the day, there's only really a handful of athletes that make it to the pros, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens after that? What happens if all of the time was spent here so that only a few can make it there, right? And you have to have something, and this is one thing that I've learned early on, is that you have to really have something to fall back on. And there's nothing like, I think, the emphasis of academics, right? I mean, and it doesn't necessarily have to be academia to go pursue a degree, but at least some other career path that if for some reason I don't make it to the pro, then I have something to fall back on, right? And that's the thing. I mean, we don't want to, I certainly don't want to take any dream for any kid or for my kids, but I am realistic. I am, hey, what happens if you get hurt? What happens if you don't make it? What happens if you get cut? What happens if after high school you say, man, Dad, these guys are way, and I don't want to put the time. Because I do feel that in order to get to a level of what these pros are, there's a lot that we don't know, a lot of struggles and a lot of hurdles that personally you have to go through yourself as an athlete. And I don't think your parents or any other support group are there, but really it's the person inside that really drives you to get to where you want to be. And without that drive, I think it's really hard. I mean, obviously, a physical ability is great, having that physique, that athleticism. Obviously, that's a plus. Yeah. But you also have to put the work in. Well,
having that physique is a testimony to the amount of work that they're putting in.
Correct.
You see these athletes in person, they look like they're from another planet.
Yeah.
They're it's just like, wow, why are you that big, that buff? It's just crazy. But it's all that time and effort that's put into it.
To this day, we can still talk about Michael Jordan. And for some folks that are in the younger era, they still know who he is. And there's a lot of documentaries, but there's a lot of, there's a lot of good data out there, good information how this guy came about, right? Yeah. I mean, his personal struggles, having to beat his older brother, was cut from the high school team, I think. Didn't really get to play up until he got to college and he became an all-star. But there was a lot of work. And even in the NBA, was pushed around because he was thinner, didn't have the muscle, worked out, worked his way. Obviously, having a supporting cast is always good to win these championships. But there's something inside that person that drives him to be the best at that field. And I think that has to be also a component of success when it comes to athletes. Aside from, it's good to have the supporting cast around you, but if you don't have that drive, nobody can give that to you. So, well, I guess that's the end of that question, huh?
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess it's my turn.
All right.
Pick from the bunch. I think I saw my own, so grab this. It says, when are you satisfied with your youth's efforts in sports? I'm going to ponder on that now. I think that I've been the most satisfied with their efforts when I see them having fun. And I know that sounds so like, cliche kind of where it's just like have fun, right? But there is, even though we say have fun to our kids, you can tell when they're actually having fun, when they're actually enjoying it, right? And I always gauge that when they're asking for it, right? Hey, Dad, can we practice? Hey, Dad, can we go shoot hoops? Hey, Dad, can we go to the golf course? That's never been the thing. And that, me and Jose talk about that all the time. It's like, I would love for him to, really take up the sport, but I've never been asked, hey, Dad, can we go to the golf course? And for that reason, all right, I'll back off on that, right? But can we go shoot hoops? Hey, Dad, can you show me, can we work on my Euro step outside? Those are little moments where it's coming from him or coming from them, both of my two boys that play. And that's super satisfying because it's like I'm not out there jamming it down their throats or anything like that. And I will literally joke around if I see them on their Xbox or whatever. Hey, you should be shooting 1,000 free throws right now, and I'll walk by their room and I'll say something like that. Hey, you should be doing some push-ups or something, man. But it doesn't mean they go do it. I'm not saying, hey, get your butt out there and do it, right? Unless I'm really mad and they need to get out of their house because they're driving Mom crazy. But the other day, it's nice and cool outside, so we start opening the windows. And I had the window open, and I could hear a basketball bouncing outside. And it was like, I go out there, and it's my son's playing basketball, and I told him, this is like music to my ears, like you guys choosing to come outside and play on your own, and because they're just playing. And I was just like, they're like, I just walked back inside because I'm like, let them play, I'm not going to go out there and start drilling them or anything, but I think that for me, those are the moments that make me really proud and make me very, happy and satisfied with their performance.
Yeah, I guess looking at it, I think of it as like when do you stop the push? Maybe like if my kids were doing a sport and they said, look, Dad, I don't want to do it anymore. Do you be the dad that says, okay, good enough, or do you be the dad that says, no, come on, stick with it, you can do this, because again, it's that push. If they don't have the buy-in, is it really good? Just keep pushing them and tell them, no, hey, you're going to do it. Hey, you're going to basketball. Hey, you're going to baseball. Just because we want it, or do you be satisfied and say, okay, we got the most out of this. Maybe let's go try a different sport, or maybe let's go, try something else.
So I'll interject there. There was right after COVID, right, and these guys were just chilling inside, and we were trying to keep them active. But it was very like motivation was at an all-time low. I don't want to play basketball. I don't want to play golf. I don't want to do anything, right? You have to do something. You have to do something. And my wife and I we sat them down. They were on the stairs, and we said, all right, you're going to do something, and it's going to be at least 3 days a week. And so you're going to pick right now what you want to do. You're going to pick, the Arts Council had their summer arts program going. I go, so you're going to either do that, you're going to do basketball, they had to pick one art and one sport. So there was a couple different options there, basketball being one of them, golf being the other, and then they either had to do the summer arts program or they had to do like, they had like a guitar lesson thing, right? And so like, pick it, what do you guys want to do? Well, I don't want to do it. My older one, I don't want to do, I don't know. And at that time, he was saying the AAU team that I was going to sign him up for was too hard. I said, son, yeah, it's hard because you don't know it yet. That's why you go over there. You gotta get yourself over that hump. Just because something's hard, it doesn't mean that you quit. Just because it's putting a little bit of pressure on you doesn't mean that you back off. And as a parent, I'm not going to let you back off if I know that you're capable of doing these things. So those are those, as a parent, it's like you try to coach them through overcoming adversity, overcoming obstacles, and bettering themselves. No, we're not trying to make the NBA, right? But I want you to know that anything that you want to do in life is going to require hard work, it's going to require effort, and it's going to require your dedication, right, and your commitment. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. Rohit, to your point, I think when we look at are we satisfied? Did we push hard enough? I think with my kids, early on, I know my daughter didn't want to swim, right? And I go, what kid doesn't like the water, right? And I continued to expose her to a point where she finally got it. Obviously, there's kids that are afraid with the water. And she became like a fish. Mm-hmm. This is something that she loves. And she loves to do it every summer. Dad, we can go swimming. Dad, we can go swimming. But again, I could have easily said, all right, she's afraid of it. I'm not going to push her anymore. I'm going to leave her back. But, I think as parents we have, and I mean, again, me speaking for myself, is we have that obligation to help our kids and push them a bit. And when it comes to sports, I think we do the same, but at times I think we push them a little extra, right? And in my case, with my kids, when I'm present there and I'm out there playing with them, they're always cognizant of me being in the back end. Did I do this right? Is this going to be to my dad's standard? So early on, I started catching on to that, and I would see that sometimes it wasn't fun being out there playing with Dad, because Dad always was critical about their
You always had something to say.
Something to say, right?
Yeah.
And they're having to turn over and look, did I do this right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
not only do they have the pressure of trying to perform, but there's a pressure of Dad being there, and it shouldn't be like that. I should be able to have fun with my kids. So I try to prepare them when I go out there, but lately, I just found out that if I let them both go out there on their own, they have a lot more fun and enjoy the sport, because they build a special bond where Dad's no longer there overseeing them, criticizing them. And I don't. And when I got to admit, I mean, when I criticize, it's just you could have done this better. You should have placed it here. Why did you hit it this way? When you yourself are not perfect, right? I see myself out there, right? I spray the ball all over the place.
For the record, Jose was the 2020 club champion in Madera, so he's pretty good.
That was old news, right? But again, I found out that, for them, it's sometimes being kids are being kids. I remember my daughter just going out there and wanting to play in the sand.
Yeah.
Taking off her shoes, taking off her socks, and I go, you know what? Why not? And my son, because he's older, he wouldn't do it because I was there.
Yeah.
And I go, son, get out there and just get wet. Get wet with the sprinklers. Go out there and play with the sand.
Yeah.
No, Dad. I mean, it's different attitude. And I think when you let them by themselves, they goof off a bit more.
Yeah.
They see this more as, this is just some time with my sister, having time, not as competitive, because that competitive edge, there's a place for it.
Right.
But it can't. I don't know that you can have it at all times, because you got to know when to switch it off and switch it on.
Right.
Because if not, I think kids do put a lot of pressure on themselves to try to do good, not only in academia but also in the athletic world. And I think, again, it comes down to a balance. I don't have a recipe for it yet as a father. Obviously, I think that there may be some therapy later on that I'm going to have to pay for, right? But I mean, I hope that, and again, I say this with the. I say this honestly, is that I hope that in the future that I was able to at least give them opportunities, but at the same time explain to them why it was important to me, why I wanted to see you guys succeed in certain things. I know it's not, my life isn't yours, but you're a reflection of me, and I hope that I've given you the tools to be successful at whatever you decide to do.
Right.
And satisfied, I want to say that I'm getting to that point where I am. I can accept that I'm satisfied that they're healthy, that they're good, that they're actually just goofing off with each other and having a good time.
Yeah.
Versus, having that high expectation that they're going to make it to the LPGA or PGA. Right? I just put it. I put it on them, because again, it goes back to that self-drive. If they have it, they'll find a way, and hopefully they get to where they want to get. If it's athletics, good. If it's academia, then that's fine. I'm going to be satisfied either way, because at the end of the day, you want them to come back. You don't want them to hold that resentment. Dad, you pushed me so hard. You did this. And kind of to your point, Rohi, I think, you have to kind of find balance. Mm-hmm. So not sure if that's kind of the way you look at it.
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's just trying to, not force them into something, but something that'll have them want it, I guess, too, and I guess seeing natural talent. I mean, if my kid can't throw a ball, why am I pushing him into baseball? Just because I want him to. And again, I mean, I know at a little young age, it's hard to maybe notice talent, to say like, oh, that kid's got an arm, or that kid can really kick a ball. But either way they want to do it, as long as they're happy, I think I'm at that satisfaction stage. So
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Well, I think that about wraps it up. I think this conversation could go on, and I think the reason why is because it's kind of an open-ended, topic, right? There is no right answer. We all know the over, achieving dads who overbearing dads that are super involved in all this stuff, and they run their kids, and the kids are in jail, or prison. They take the turn for the worse, right? Or the kid never plays again. And then we also know where there are, no parents present, and that kid just has that edge, and they end up being a star, right? So there's no, it seems like there's almost no right combination. It ultimately comes back to what is the individual player. What are their ambitions? What are their desires? What are their natural talents? And to Jose's point, you'll find a way to get there if that's what you're destined for, right?
Yeah, and I know that the perspective that we hear today is mainly from fathers and dads. I'd love to know where women and mothers are in this here, right? So maybe shoot us some comments. Let us know if it's something that is this mainly on is it gendered in a way? Is it mainly like males feel this competitive edge or is it also females and women in the athletic world with their kids? Do they also see it the same way, or do they approach it a different way? Yeah. Maybe we can learn. I mean, obviously, we, and I don't like to say the stereotype that women are more nurturing to their kids, whereas, maybe fathers are going to be more of the driving the competitive and rearing and stuff. But, that's a good perspective to see, because we learn a lot from them. I learn a lot from my wife just listening to the way, hey, well, maybe you should do it this way.
Yeah.
And, at that time, I just react quick. That's the way I am. I react. But when you really take time to think about it, maybe you're right. And it'd be a good perspective to have. Yeah. So if there's any comments out there, please feel free to get them out here. We want to hear your comments and tell us if in fact we're hitting it dead on, or maybe way off. We're way off, right?
Well, and that's the thing. There's every parent's going to feel a little bit differently, or have a different perspective on these things, And I was at a wrestling tournament this weekend, and shoot, man, the moms were just as feisty as more feisty sometimes, right? Yeah. But there's a lot to unravel here with young athletes. So yeah, drop us a comment. Let us know what your experiences are, or what type of questions that you'd like you would like us to answer, and we can respond in the comments as well. So you guys good with that?
All right.
Well, thank you for watching. Jose, Rohi, have a great day.